Alright, Chapter 9, Electrical Grounding and Bonding. General information. The chapter provides general information related to two hazardous conditions must consider the handling, dispensing petroleum products, static electricity, and stray electrical current. National Field Fire Protection Agency 77 recommended practices for static electricity for additional guidance with the static electricity hazards. 9.2 Static charge generation of refueling system. Low conductivity liquids such as jet fuel becoming electrical statically charged while flowing through the fuel system that produces enough electronic energy needs to cause ignition, fire, explosion of the fuel air mixtures above the liquid fuel surface. The mechanism of electrostatic charge generation is very complex with many variables that can increase and decrease the amount of electrical energy in the fuel itself. Certain equipment and conditions of the fuel system produces a high static charge necessity designed to retard the hazard. Federal filter and separators are profile static generators because the filter media must be grounded directly in ground rodding. Fuel system and grounded with either the potential of each piece of the equipment is electrically integrated with the bonding through mechanical connections when no continuity exists. The jumper wires installed with the cross-insulated sections where the flange sections are broken and bonded is attained by the insulation jumper wires. The insulation flange provided with the cathodic protection proposed the required special devices to provide the continuity above the piping is tied to the ground rods under the ground sections are grounded and are being contacted with the earth. During the refueling, static electricity is generated through the piping, especially for the filter separator. Although some of the dissipated through the contact of the piping, a residual charge remains at the place of the destination tank. Usually, the aircraft tanks are different. The potential than the system. The hydrogen safety valve is essential to the tank with the beeping on it with the system to allow the static electricity to relax. Many other factors contribute to electrostatic generation. Aircraft fuels. More detailed information may be found in Technical Laboratories or TO 0025172. During the filling operation, aircraft refuelers, commercial transportation have developed and measured electrostatic charges exceeding 50,000 volts. One reason the high voltage building up the insulating effect of the rubber tires for the grounding potential if the vehicles are not properly mounted to the servicing system. The overload methods of filling refueler transportation trucks have been replaced with the bottom loading methods. Top loading allowed with the fuel free fall, creating a large static charge inside the vehicle tank in atmosphere conditions for explosion. Bottom loading is much safer than since there is no free fall with liquid to create static electricity. 9243 Fuel flow for the equipment of the transfer of the pipes will generate sufficient static electricity to create the potential hazard that have been shown the typical flow of the fuel of the filter separator will produce the sufficient static electricity to create a spark. 9244 The movement of contamination, rust, milk, scale, water, air during the stable setting of the storage ionizing contaminants produce the static starch. These charges build up and around the trigger porting, engaging the sample device and floating swiping pipes, and if not discharged through the fuel to the wall of the grounded tank, sparks can occur on the vapor space above the fuel of the petroleum products of the poor condition conductors of electricity bleeding off the static electrical charge slowly. Therefore, contaminants ionized during the fuel transfer to the tank hasten the buildup of the static charge within the tank, increasing the possibility of electrical spark. 9245 Particle vapor suspended with the air can be ionized to create the difference in potential within the liquid fuel. Normal relative to the humidity in the atmosphere, moisture in the air provides the part of the dissipate with the static charge safely. However, in the dry air is a particularly low temperature. The rate of discharge is slow and dangerous for accumulation of the static electricity can build up. 9246 Personal clothing, wool, rayon, synthetic materials accumulate static electricity for the normal body movement. These charges to be discharged with the clothing, skin, and tools of the equipment as they can come in contact with the components of the fuel system. 9247 Aircraft civil equipment may become electrostatically charged due to the atmospheric conductive coupling. In this case, base of the weather service notifies the maintenance officer for the impending hazardous conditions such as lightning storms within 8 kilometers or 5 miles of the fuel handling operation. Maintenance of the repair activities, tank cleaning operations will be temporarily stopped. 9.3 Preventing static electricity. It is not possible to completely eliminate the static electricity. Use the following precautions to reduce magnitude of the charge, therefore the possible spark. Connecting a static bond with the wire between the two components before making and breaking a connection. Before working on a flange connection insulated with one another non-metallic insulating materials. When vehicles and aircrafts are grounded, attaching the ground wire to the vehicle and aircraft before the bonding on the ground rod. This is especially important for the operation involving the fuel transfer, fuel defueling, loading, and unloading. Avoid surface aggregation limitations and initial fill rate of the until fuel storage or to less than 3 feet per second. Maintain this flow rate until the flow rate of the food pan is afloat and the fill of the pipe is completely submerged until the flow of the pipe is completely submerged into all other tanks. Wait 30 minutes after loading and unloading an above ground fuel tank before allowing anyone into it. In it, personnel will ground themselves onto the tank by making firm contact between the tank and backs of the bare hand or holding to a coin in the bare hand before opening access covers. Holding a coin in the bare hand before opening the access covers, inspecting holes. Also ground samples devices to the tank before opening the sample well. Alright, 9.4, relaxation or release of electrostatic energy. Fuels and poor conductor static dissipated additives is added to the JPD8 improving conductivity. JP5 lacks an additive so it is designed rely on the time and the delay to dissipate the charge of the certain refueling equipment on the relaxation tanks, delaying the movement of the electrostatic charges. 941 fuel components such as hydrocarbons chemicals permit the flow of electrons when there is electrostatic charge with the fuel in the tank of the pipe with the mutual repulsion of like of the charge and fuel and their attraction and opposite charge with the tank of the pipe causing the current flow. Positive ions may be attracted to the filter and separated while negative ions are attracted to the aircraft tank. The modern wire provides a return path for the ions to equalize. Most electrostatic problems can be prevented through the design, bonding, and adhering to the safety procedures. It's important to remember the initial fill tanks and filter separator slowly. 9.5 grounding and bonding procedure. Although the generation of static electricity state currents can be reduced, they can be completely eliminated. Further reduce the hazard possible. They cannot be completely eliminated. To further reduce the hazard possible, spark discharge static charge can be greatly reduced in proper regrounding of the bonding techniques. The filling ground procedures must be followed with a greater character and during the storage and handling of the jet fuel because of the increased possibility of ignition by the static charge. Standard grounding criteria in the AFMAN 321065 grounding systems. Note: do not use stainless steel grounding rods. Alright, 951 storage tanks. Figure 9.1 shows the typical grounding method of an installed on an existing above ground. The current design criteria for the new above ground vertical tanks requires the use of plastic liners between the sand support of the tank and native soil. So grounding is required older than tanks without liner. Where the tank rests on the earth does not require the use of ground rods. If the necessary with the grounding system will be installed using the galvanized steel ground rods of 6.3 to 9.5 or 0.25 to 0.375 inches galvanized guy wire to the grounding conductor. No copper is used in the grounding system. The purpose of the requirement is to eliminate the corrosion caused by the steel reacting with the copper when existing above the ground where the grounding is provided within the tank. This contact with the earth including the oil-treated sand, using the copper grounding rods on the copper grounding conductors grounding. The system should be removed and retrieved in the same way prescribed for the new installation. Also, original design criteria calls for the various methods of mounting of the floating roof of the tank walls and floating roof tanks. Typical ground method existing above ground and shown in Figure 9.1. This includes bonding ladders. The floating of the roof tanks is shown in 9.3. When the bonding of the cables require replacement 2.3, 0.09 inch stainless steel wire rope in the nylon covered, and it's in 4010005756234. 9.1 above ground tanking grounding procedures shows the difference of the rods of the to the left. You see the detail E, a solderless connector connecting wire, ground wire. Detail B, cable, ground wire. Detail A, welding tank ground cable, ground wire, ground clamp, drill hole in the clear flange bolts. Also the pipe clamp, grounding bar. The detail with the concrete supports. Detail A, horizontal tank grounding. Alright, this goes back to the safety valves. You're going to want to use those on the flow meter with the grounding and the drive approximately meanwhile high water line through the copper wire to the tanker delivery terminal. See the details. It's given some cable clamps and flexible cable connection, ground connection to the tanker. Grounding pipe, pier, floating barge facilities, grounding, fitting, discharge, expansions, and bends. Evaluation of the elevation B shows the channel, knife blade switch, mounted slated base. Usually these are double throw switches. Copper alligator lamp tanker connections alternate at 200 amps. The test clip for the copper plug through 9-3 typical method of bonding ladders for floating roof tanks. The bonding cable is at the top, and the jumper ladder is the floating roof from the floating roof deck of the tank shell attached to the midpoint of the ladder travel. Raised lugs to each of the end of both jumpers. Both the clean and metal surfaces length of the cable will be determined by the maximum amount of ladder travel. Pier facilities. Before starting unloading operations, the barge or tanker and before the hose connections are made to secure the bolt and the grounded wire to actually clean the paint-free surface of the discharge line of the ship. After this ground has been established, close the switch of the docking, completing the circuit, maintaining the circuit until offloading has been completed. Hoses have been disconnected. See Figure 9.2. Typical grounding bonding procedures when existing in the number 4 AWG copper standard cable copper alligator clamps, replacing using the 2.3 0.09 inch corrosion-resistant plastic covered steel cables. The MS-27610 clipper and electrical ground national stack number, respectively. Also, pier facilities periodically check all the ground connection cable switches of the bond jumpers for the contact and condition tightness and specified in paragraph 1023. 953 tanker car loading and unloading facilities. When the tanker car is being loaded and securely attached to the ground cable to clean the connection of the car before the opening any of the valve dome cover to the connection of the fuel hose. There is no requirement to connect the ground cable between the tank car and standing fuel line header during the unloading operation because adequate grounding is provided with the rails without the use of the ground cable. N5-4 truck fill stands and unloading facilities under some of the atmospheric conditions. The truck in motion builds up the considerable change in the static electricity attached to the ground cable before the opening fill hatch and outlet valve. The connection with the fuel hose. Figure 9.4 shows the typical binding of the cable system. The ground details the ground rod B near the base of the fill stand. As soon as the loading and unloading operations are completed with the fuel hose, the detached with the vehicle, disconnected from the ground connector, make periodic inspection and ensure the tightening of the bond in good condition. Ground condition always exists. Maintain to the test of the ground components as outlined in the paragraph 1023 TO 0025172. The replacement existing of the 4 AWG copper stranded cable becomes necessary using the 2-3 military stainless steel wire rope and nylon cover. Truck fill stand unloading area, the ground fittings and unloading lines of ground rod clipping of the minimum of the 15 millimeters 2.4 millimeters ground rod, inch of the ground rod tanker on the tanker trailer. This shows the fixed tank grounding stud or receptacle metal clip of the plug stranded welding cable to the unloading lines of the grounding cable, minimum ground rod. Your grounding fittings lines look like this, alternating in the sin gauge expansion ground line cable. 955 truck fill standing grounding assembly. The assembly modification of the truck fill stand done by the basic contracting engineer for local resource along with the fuel management, fuel flight funding materials available from the DESC. Visit the DESC homepage at the DESC DLA mill default ASP. The ground assembly is installed must be attached to the permanent structure of the fill stand readily available for the refuel operated must be electronically interconnected to an existing above ground static ground. The fixture used the standard ground hardwire already installed with the refueler's serial cables. The design to provide extra features to make the receptacle available for either the direction of the entry of the automatically disconnection if the vehicle's accidentally drive off, and also includes additional receptors in case of jack failure. The aluminum T-bar may be attached to any type of the surface painted or bare metal with the standard cleaning cadmium plated nuts and bolts. A number 10 or larger solid copper wires should be interconnected with the assembly lug and improve the static ground. Galvanic corrosion between two different types of metals will be minimal and have little effect on the assembly. N5 956 hydrant fuel system. When the hydrant system is grounded to be convenient to be used in galvanized steel combination ground rod tied down anchor at least 16 millimeters or 0.625 in diameter 2.4 meters 8 feet in length. It is convenient to the aircraft for the type of the two system is centered between the hydrant outlet box and the electric junction box paving. The surface of the paving should be cupped out of the provided with the accessibility to provide with the standard electrical ground clip on one end of the ground cable. This connecting fitting should be provide positive gripping by the clip the teeth the only, so that must be opened to remove. Some of the type of the 2 and 3 system permanently bonded to the binding of the hydraulic outlet driven round. Rather, the type 2 system also bonds the electrical conduity of the electrical junction receptacle box with the 1.0 copper bonding of the cable. Approved the ground cables. Usually, cathodic protection is applied with the hydrant system on the ground piping the retarded corrosion when the hydrant outlet is beyond with the ground of the outright. The outlet must be electrically isolated from the cathodic protected piping system, and the first pair of the flanges be allowed over the outlet. This is required to prevent shorting of the cathodic protection system, thereby making an effective note that the cathodic protection is installed. The hydrant outlet valve is grounded. It's extremely important periodically verify the integrity of the isolation flange. Use at least 0.625 inches diameter, 2.4 meters, 8 feet in length, galvanized steel rods within tie-down rings of the shepherd's hooks and the static grounds for bare base. Remove remote control location use of the grounding from the northern ground for the national stock number. Resistance of an improved stock ground may be as high as 1000 ohms, although lower resistance is usually experienced. 9.6 Electrical currents. Electrical currents originate with the generator transmission system wiring electrical devices. The more dangerous the static electrical becomes the continuous electrical spark compared with the brief spark of the static charge. Observe the following precautions eliminated with the hazard electrical currents. Verify the electrical work. The permanent petroleum storage dispensing system complies with the National Electronic Classification for Classic 1's liquids. This is required in National Fire Protection Agency 402049 Standard Aircraft and Fuel Service, which requires electrical equipment wiring to comply with the National Fire Protection Agency 70 and Article 515 using Class 1 liquid requirements. This all for all applications. I'm not happy. 9.7 Stray currents. General information. Stray currents follow the different paths of the intended the circuits or any of the extraneous current in the earth. Source of the stray currents include the electrical railways, electrical power system, electrical welders, cathodic protection system, aircraft, aeronautics, electrical equipment, malfunction, Air Force's fixed refueling system, and intimate contact with the earth and stray currents that sometimes take the path through the contact parts of the system. Hazardous due to the stray currents. The stray current causes the arcs that will ignite the combustible fuel, air, and mixture. Eliminate the hazard due to the stray currents. The grounding bonding of the method used to reducing the static hazard is important to eliminating stray of the current hazard. This does not eliminate stray currents, but does not ensure the continuous path that is provided with to conduct them into the earth without the arc and tank car loading and unloading facilities. Railroad spurs used in loading and unloading tank cars should be insulted from the main line rails, so insulating that them stray currents that may be flowing into the main line rails. 975 Marine Terminals. Stray currents with the cathodic protection system is marine terminals require special attention. These systems are used to protection piping and steel piers, causing currents to flow in the water. These still hold the vessel's acts of the conductor for these currents. These ships ashore fuel handling constituted conductors are contained for reinforced wire and will complete a lower resistant circuit with the vessel with the short siding piping. Arcs may be then occur between the vessels and hoses when they are hose connected. The disconnector brought into the contact with the vessel's decks and prevent the acting of the ground and cables connected between the shore and side piping. The vessel before the operation begins, the switch wired insertion of the cable closed after the cable connection is made before the fuel handling hose is taken aboard the vessel and straight current flows of the vessel and to shore by the cable arcing is avoided. That's the fuel and hose connections. 976 Piping. Straight current may flow through the piping system because of the electrical resistance is low compared to the surrounding earth. When removing any sections of the piping valve, meter, and other components that will interrupt the continuity of the system, first install the bounding jump wire. This jumper installed with the surrounding components to be removed. It will prevent an arc when competent and is removed. Alright. 9.8 Electrical inspection, testing, and notification procedure. Approved static grounds. Approved static grounds are provided with the conducting electrostatic. No. Charges to stay Electrical current is either the ground potential. The electrostatic voltage may be as high as 50,000 volts with the lower current, and consequently, the static ground resistance may also be high. It's like 1000 ohms. The purpose of an improved static ground interconnected with the aircraft support equipment is to place all components of the system to electrical potential to prevent arcing. Throw switch. Identify the marking static grounds. All static grounds referenced in the mail will have a resistance of less than 10,000. All the static grounds referenced in the manual will have a list of resistance of 10,000 ohms. All existing static grounds will have one time the test resistance value is permanently recorded. Static grounded with a resistance greater with 10,000 ohms. Ohms will be grounded to replace any static ground. Mechanically damaged will repair and retest the static grounds. It has to be tested periodically after its initial test. Chapter 10, Recurring Work Program. Shit.